name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas in marketing and business. And my guest today is David Guttman. David is a serial entrepreneur. He's actually had two 8-figure exits. He's a cancer survivor. He's a mentor of other CEOs. I think he mentioned he's been mentoring about 8 companies currently. He's an author. He's a Wharton grad. David, welcome to the show. You've had some amazing experiences.
Thank you. In fact, you got all that right, except I had one 8-figure exit and one 9-figure exit. But the rest of it you nailed. But thanks for having me on. Appreciate it, David.
That's awesome. Well, we may talk about all of that, but I want to talk about today. You and I have been having a really good conversation about AI, and AI is a topic everybody's talking about. But I want to get your perspective about how to apply AI into a business and to any business, and just get your thoughts about how you're using AI today, how you're using it with your the people that you're mentoring, and just how you think about it in transforming businesses.
Sure. I think my perspective on this is a bit unique. So even though I graduated from college in 1988 with a computer science degree, and I actually had a concentration in artificial intelligence, but it was a very different thing back then. It was very simplistic, rule-based systems, pattern matching, very simple neural networks, programming in languages like Prolog and Lisp and things like that. Nothing like the LLMs and of today. It's like a completely different beast. But I think just because I had that background, especially for someone who, I'm 60, I understand it in a way that, probably most 60-year-olds don't. Um, and and it's interesting and it almost doesn't even matter what age you are, but most people, people base what they do on what they used to do before. So if what you're used to using is a search engine, people are using ChatGPT and Claude like a search engine. So if you just type queries into, an AI tool like you used to into a search engine, the results are better, but they're not that much better. The way that you need to think about it is, in fact, one of the guys that I mentor, he's using it in an incredibly creative way. He basically gives access to all the data for his company, and he actually has an agent that he calls Optimus, and it, basically analyzes all of the data. And in fact, he has agents that have meetings with other agents. They have meetings without him, and they send him summaries of the meeting. So he has someone that is an agent that has a marketing perspective, one that has an operations perspective, one that has a data analytics perspective, and they actually argue with each other.
Wow.
Um, and and by the way, the guy who built it, 25 years old, no technical background whatsoever. Now, smart kid, very disciplined, spent a lot of time figuring it
Yeah.
out, a lot of time, days, not weeks and months, right? And the reality is, if you, the way you need to think about it is, if you leverage AI properly, you have access to, not just one genius person, but an unlimited number of genius people with domain expertise in every place you could possibly need domain expertise. Used to be, I think I probably cut my legal expenses down by 90% over the last 6 months. I can't imagine having a lawyer review an NDA or, an employment agreement. I sometimes, if it's really important, will have a lawyer go over what I reviewed with AI,
Hmm.
and made edits and changes to. But now instead of needing, 5 hours of a lawyer's time, I need 15 minutes. So it changed the game, across the board. And I think that people don't really they don't know how to embrace it in some ways, and they don't know how to be as afraid of it as they should be in others. Like, as an example, if I had a kid today and he was thinking about going to medical school or law school, I would seriously try to talk them out of it.
Yeah.
Because there is no doctor and no lawyer that's going to be as good as AI. I mean, I know Elon was saying that there will not be a single surgeon better than a robotic surgeon in 5 years. Not
Yeah.
one on the planet. And I think he's probably right.
Yeah, it really is changing. Let's just unpack a couple of those ideas because people are using AI for what you described, which is really like some research functions, right? I want to learn something new instead of a search engine. I'm using it for research. But people are also using it for cost savings, as you mentioned. So you're using it to save money on lawyer. People, don't spend as much on marketing, perhaps, an agency to replace some functions like that. But the real leverage you're talking about, like with the example you gave with your friend, is so powerful. Where he's trying to create something new or try to bring things together in a business context. Tell me more about how you think about that. Maybe almost using AI as a thought partner or putting these agents together so that they can create something powerful for you.
Well, think about how it used to be, right? So, like when I decided I wanted to go back and get my MBA, which, by the way, I tore up live on a podcast. That's how useful I think an MBA is these days. And the reason I did it was at the time there was no internet, right? So, I had seen my dad. My dad started a software company in his late 20s that eventually IPO'd, but he got pushed out of his company. And the reason he got pushed out was there were areas of the business he didn't really understand. And so I'm like, I want to make sure that I understand enough of every aspect of business so that no one can bullshit me about marketing, operations, accounting, finance, whatever it might, HR, whatever it might be. And so, but nowadays, instead of having to do that, I can basically have an agent that's an expert in HR. I can have an agent that's an expert in operations. I can have an agent that's expert, not only an expert in marketing, but even down to the email marketing, social media marketing, you name it. And so now I can have these agents that have absolutely deep expertise and, at the PhD, just absolute expert level at my fingertips practically for free and immediate. The other one, I'll give you another example that, really was where the light bulb went off for me. So I think I mentioned when you and I, talked when we were off camera about the not-for-profit that I'm doing with my dad, my 84-year-old father. The only thing I had was a concept was, I think I want to do this, 30 acts of kindness where we document someone's kindness journey. But I just had the outline of the idea. I spent 3 hours doing a brainstorming session with AI. And, GenSpark was the one I happened to be using at the time. And at the end of the 3 hours, I had a 100-page document, okay, that I don't think I could have accomplished the same thing before AI in 3 months. And even if I had 3 months, it wouldn't have been as good as what I got in 3 hours. I had a 100-page document that outlined the entire business strategy for what I was trying to do. So not only is it great for very specific tasks like accounting or finance or operations or data analytics or legal or any of those things, even for ideating on something, it's unbelievably useful if you know how to interact with it. And I think that's where people fall short is they treat it more like a search engine. What I do is, so there's two techniques that I use that I find really useful. One of them is um, I give it I give very detailed prompts. What I do is I imagine I was talking to someone who is an absolute expert in the thing that I'm talking about, and I ask them a very elaborate prompt questioning. And when you don't get back a short answer, you get back, pages of, what about this? And here's an idea, and what do you think? And what I do is I go through the entire transcript of the response line by line, and I respond to every single piece of it. Well, I like that idea, but here's another idea I have, and this is why I don't think that would work. And I talk to it like I would be talking to an expert.
Hmm.
And that gets me an unbelievably rich result where it maximizes my ideas. It gives me ideas I didn't even have. It really is powerful. The other technique I use is I use multiple AI tools simultaneously. When I was working on my TED Talk, as an example, when I had, a paragraph I didn't like quite the way it sounded, I would feed it to three different AIs. Like I give it to Grok, I'd give it to GenSpark, I'd give it to Claude, and I would say, I don't really like the way this sounds. I can't exactly tell you why. This is the emotion I want the listener to have. Give me three options that would do that. And I ask each of the three AIs that same prompt. Each of them would now give me three responses. I now have nine to pick from. I would curate and sort of take the best of both of those. And I say, well, here's what I came up with. And I'd feed it back to those three AIs. And I would just iterate till I got something that was absolutely what I wanted. And so if you know how to interact with the AI, like that's where the magic happens. Because if you just use it like a search engine, it's not that special.
Yeah, you're not going to go very deep on that. So I think that's very powerful. I want to kind of explore some of the human traits that you're referring to in some of these practices you do. So, as you think about it, what are the human traits that make it possible to get the most out of AI in the way that you're talking about? I mean, one of the things I hear you talking about is persistence, right? So you're able to not just put out a prompt, take the answer and say, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That was great. I'll go run with it." You're working it, right? You're working the problem and you're kind of going after it. Talk to me about other human traits, other things that you think are important for people to kind of embody in order to get the most out of AI, working with AI.
You need to treat it like a brilliant friend, right?
Mm,
And you need to literally treat it like you would a person. Like imagine, so let's use an example. I have a really hard business problem, and I got 2 hours of Elon Musk's time, right? And I could just ask him anything I wanted to. I wouldn't ask him one question. You wouldn't be able to shut me up. And every time he answered, I'd be saying, "Well, tell me more about that, and why do you think that's the right thing to do?" You need to treat it like a person, but a brilliant one that remembers exactly what you said. The other thing you need to do is it does still have some hallucination, and it does still, you know, um, one of the things that I found about it that I really like because I've also used it. I hate to use the word therapy, but I've used it for therapy,
mm,
right? And what I love about it is even if I go to a great therapist, right? Um, let's say that I tell them about a situation and I ask for advice and they give me advice. And I realize from the advice they gave me that they didn't understand the full context of the situation. So, no, 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 I understand why that's the advice you gave me, but here's some additional context you didn't have. My fault, I didn't provide it. Um, because they're humans, they're emotionally invested in the advice they already gave me being right. They're professional, right? With AI, I don't have that problem. I don't have to talk them out of their previous advice. I just say, "Oh, I totally understand why that's the advice you gave me. Here's some additional context." AI just takes the additional context and says, "Oh, now that I know the more information you just provided, here's what I would now tell you to do." And it's like that. And that's the thing you don't get in a human interaction that you can get in an AI interaction that's so much better.
So what I hear you saying there is talking about discernment. You've got to have a certain level of discernment about the advice that and the information that you're getting in order to push back, in order to give it more information. You don't really understand. Let me share something else with you. Have those deeper conversations. And I think that do you think that AI benefits people with experience? You and I are about the same age. We've had many experiences, especially in business and leadership. Do you think the AI benefits people with experience more, or do you think it can help people really at every level? I mean, if you're an entry level employee, does it benefit you because you can learn so much faster and kind of come up the experience curve faster? Or does it really benefit people maybe like us who've had lots of experience and kind of go deeper on subjects, you know, that we wouldn't normally be able to understand?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is it depends a little bit, right? I do think having the deep experience, I have 35 years of experience, right? I've seen an awful lot. I haven't seen everything, but I've seen an awful lot. And and I think it allows me to have a little bit better discernment. With that being said, one of the guys I mentor is 18. Now he's running an AI company, so he really understands AI even at a deeper level than I do. Um, and I see him even without the experience, being able to get a tremendous amount. In fact, he's able to get things from AI that I can't. Right? Like I don't know how to create an agent to review all of my email from 10 different email accounts and create a summary document that tells me which things to act. In fact, he has even write draft emails to respond to everything. So, he's writing those agents himself. So I would argue that if you have the willingness to go down the rabbit hole a bit more, and again, if I were giving advice to a young person now, there is no place I would spend more time than going down that AI rabbit hole, because I think that one of the few things that someone can do who's young to really sort of protect themselves longer term is to become an absolute expert in AI. And the reality is you can use AI to help you become an expert in AI.
Yeah, and it's transformational. You and I talked a little bit about the app that we're building here at NowSpeed, which is an AI agent. So, it was kind of interesting. Like a year ago, like probably 2 years ago, we started introducing AI and signing up licenses and asking our team to use it. And about 6 months ago, I asked our head of services, "Hey, how much productivity boost are we getting out of this? In other words, can I raise my prices? Can I raise my hourly rate because we can do more in less time?" And he said, "Dave, it's about 10%. It's helping
Hmm.
us copy, it's helping us do some landing page work, it's helping us do this, but you're not going to be able to get, you're not seeing massive productivity boosts. And then we started working with agents and we started automating workflows and automating the
Mm,
whole process of doing whole things like this SEO AI agent. So now we're seeing like 10 to 50x productivity boosts, not
yeah.
15%, not 20%. It's just like it's transformational. Where are you advising your mentees and the companies that you're working on that they might be able to see those kinds of opportunities? There's the thought leadership piece that you and I have been talking about, but where are the big opportunities in business you think with where AI can be transformational?
The interesting thing is I actually have there's like a bifurcation for me. The people that I mentor that are 25 and under, I don't have to tell them how to use AI. They're helping me understand how to leverage AI better. The people that are, say, 30 and above, them I am actually helping. In some cases, I'm pointing them to the guys I'm mentoring that are 25 and under to use their capabilities or to talk to them and have them, help them in the domain. Again, I know a lot about it. I wouldn't consider myself an expert. You know, Joey Seaman, who runs AI companies, he's an expert. Like when I have a really deep dive question, privately, the 60-year-old asking an 18-year-old, hey, walk me through this, kind of amazing.
Yeah, it can be really transformational in many ways. What do you think? I just had an interesting conversation with a consultant in Europe, and his perspective was that many European business leaders are not embracing AI as much as U.S. business leaders. Part of that's because they're saying, "Hey, we don't want to take all of our data and proprietary information and put it on some server in the U.S. and we don't know what's going to happen to it." There's this little bit of that fear going on, and so he's dealing with this, uh, you know, this adoption challenge where he's seeing the people in California go for it whole hog, and the people in maybe in Germany not so much yet. What do you tell the 30 plus, maybe 40 plus, 50 plus executives about AI and how they should be using it really to apply in their business? How do you kind of get them over that hump, maybe emotionally, build their confidence so that they can be taking advantage of all this too?
Look, I think that you could drive yourself crazy, worrying about every possible eventuality. The reality is there are ways to architect it in such a way where data is anonymized, where you're not shared. There are ways to sort of split things up in a way so you're not putting everything, the whole in a whole cloth, in one LLM. But there are ways to architect it so you don't have those exposures, or they're at least severely reduced, significantly reduced. And so instead of being afraid of the technology, identify where the problems are and find a solution to the problem, right? Which is, hey, if I'm worried about putting my data out there and it being used for the wrong purposes or whatever, solve that problem. Don't say, well, I'm not going to use the technology because I'm afraid of what it might do with it. Solve the actual problem.
Yeah.
And
So
if you think about it, at a different level, hacking is the same kind of thing. Well, hey, maybe I don't want to put my business on the internet because someone's going to hack me, right? Well, that'd be a really poor strategy.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's really good advice. Really like get focused, get serious, and really solve the problem. I'm fascinated by the nonprofit that you're building with your dad. Tell me more about that, and maybe tell me the role that you think AI could play in that work as well.
Well, it's already played a huge role. So basically, I wrestled in college. My dad wrestled in college, and so we do this father-son wrestling trip once a year, where we go to a college wrestling match together, and we do it every year. And this year, we're doing Iowa Penn State, and we had the 7-hour drive round trip. So my dad's lamenting the fact that he's retired and there's no reason to get out of bed in the morning. And so I said, "Hey, Dad, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be?" And he's like, "I want to make the world a nicer place. I want people to be nicer to each other." Couldn't agree more. But we definitely need more of that. And I love my dad. And so I'm like, well, I want to solve the problem, right? So I was familiar with 75 Hard, Andy Frisella's app, and I knew that 5 million people had gone through that. And it's 75 days. You have to track like 10 things every single day. And I started to think about it. I'm like, well, my original thought was, what if we called it 75 nice, right? That was my original thought. And I know some people that know Andy Frisella. I'm like, maybe we could get into like wave conflict or something like that. So that was my original idea. And then I'm like, well, let's shrink it to 30 days. Um, and I came up with 30 acts of kindness. So I just had the idea. My dad, as soon as I said it to my dad, he was like lit up like a Christmas tree. He was like, "Oh my God, that's an amazing idea." So that's when I did 3 hours of ideation with AI to come up with basically the business plan for what to do with 30 acts of kindness. And then my 84-year-old dad, he does have a technical background. He coded the entire MVP app with AI.
Oh my
So
gosh.
AI it got used in three ways. One, I had a guy on Fiverr created a 90-second explainer video in 2 days for a big meeting we had with Chick-fil-A. We're actually going to do a pilot with them. I have my dad coded the entire thing in Claude, and I did the entire ideation with GenSpark. So the entire business wouldn't even exist but for AI.
Wow. That is a That's an amazing example. Business planning. I think I might have mentioned I teach a course on business planning at Boston College, and it's a 7 week course, and the students put in 20 hours a week into this course, or they're supposed to. So, but that's a lot of time, and you put together the whole business plan in 3 hours in with Claude. But business planning, product development, and then even marketing, right? And I'm sure there's more on the docket. So is your thought to
Mhm.
kind of make this an AI centric company, or is just AI is just the way it's going to happen and you're going to
Well, the big
make it
the
independent?
big game changer to me. Well, first of all, to your point, part of the reason I was able to do, in 3 hours what might have taken a less experienced person a lot longer is I've done a lot of business plans in my life,
Right. Yeah.
right? So like I know how to think about it, right? It just allowed me to do it way faster. Someone less experienced would probably would have taken them, maybe would have taken more like 20 or 30 hours, right? But the way I think about this business is it used to be, in fact, the longevity business that I'm doing, same kind of thing. Normally, when you think about any kind of business that has any technology component to it, you need 9 to 12 months to build your MVP. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases, over seven figures. It's going to take you 9, 12, even 18 months is common before you have an MVP. Now it's flipped. Now it's like it's technology last. So
Mm.
my dad and I understood what we wanted the app to do before he had Claude help him write a single line of code. Because now, what it probably cost us with AI tokens, maybe it cost us $1,000, $500, something like that, to build the MVP. And it was done in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
So there's no reason because you don't have that ridiculous lead time necessary to hire a product manager and an engineering team and create wireframes and iterate and the architect we got the architecture wrong, let's re-architect it, we have all this technical debt we have to retire, and so that's going to drag things out. All those problems have gone away or certainly been greatly reduced. And so to me that means it's technology last, not technology first, because the technology is no longer super expensive and super time consuming.
Wow. That's a massive insight. It feels like that really puts a premium on the business experience, the business strategy, and the user experience if you're building the technology last, right? So, the idea of like doing things manually, making sure it works, making sure it's right for the customer, make sure you've got your ICP defined. That piece is super critical. Wow.
The menu fit, so like Tim Costco as an app called Menu Fit, he launched it in August, last August, so not even a year ago. Um, will be worth $100 million by the end of this year.
Wow.
And he has no technical background at all, zero. Okay. Didn't finish college. Um, and he basically got some guys on Fiverr that used some AI to write the original version of the code. Now he's obviously improved it, and now we have really we got a guy. Actually, the guy who we just brought on to manage the engineering team. This guy's probably one of the five best engineers I've ever interacted with in my life, and I've interacted with a lot of engineers. And he is leveraging AI in a way. One guy understanding how to leverage AI frameworks. He's doing the equivalent of 20 like a team of 20 engineers that had worked together for 10 years.
Yeah.
Like not just 20 engineers, but 20 engineers that were well coordinated. Because people really underestimate the coordination costs of large development teams. Microsoft notoriously, when they would get behind on a project, they would cut their development teams in half as a
Mm.
way to accelerate because it would reduce the coordination costs. And it's really, and the beauty of with it, leveraging AI is if you can have one person that really knows how to leverage it, the coordination costs disappear because it's one engineer.
Yeah. That's massive. So one engineer can have massive productivity and get things done. Wow. So, and I'm living that experience with our AI app in our development. So I'm really seeing that be true. Well, David, this has been a powerful conversation. You've talked about business strategy. You've talked about how you're working with different types of entrepreneurs and leveraging AI. You talked about the nonprofit that you're starting up. You talked about all kinds of ways AI can make a huge impact. And I think, the exciting thing is we're just at the beginning of this, right? We're just at the very beginning of seeing the impact. Last question. What do you think is going to be the biggest impact in AI if you're going to make a prediction in the next 12 months? What's the impact you wish is going to happen?
I feel like the thing that I want more than anything, and maybe it's just because, the longevity and health stuff is so top of mind for me, and I've had health challenges, where I try to stay as far away from doctors, hospitals, and, as I possibly can, because it never goes well. I think the third leading cause of death is medical mistakes or something in the US. Um, that that's where I think there's just an unbelievable opportunity. Because if you think about it, even if you go to a world class, let's say, cardiologist, okay, maybe they go to two or three conferences a year. Maybe they read two or three research papers a month. And that's if they're really, top of their game, right? But and that's just in the domain, niche of cardiology. Now imagine AI that can consume everything ever researched, studied, published, ever in every language up until 5 seconds ago, right? And it doesn't just know cardiology, it knows everyology, psychology, urology, neurology, nephrology, all of it. And now instead of how, because the problem is doctors are notorious for this. If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You go to an orthopedist, everything requires surgery. You go to a cardiologist, everything requires a statin. It's just how it is, right? So as opposed to imagine you had, a supercomputer with all of this domain expertise that knew it across all domain areas, and you could ask it the same medical questions we ask now. They have the ability, they have AI on a chip where they can basically replicate how an organ system will react to a drug, and they can do billions of interactions in, a day. Things that would have taken 10 years to do, they can do in a day. And that's just going to accelerate as the cost of computing, the ability to get compute power increases. So I think that's probably the biggest opportunity. And really, people just need to wake up, and you have to embrace it, or it's going to blow right by you and you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. So business, health, longevity, it's going to be key for so many things. Well, David, you're in the middle of a lot of that. So I'm really glad I had a chance to talk to you. You shared some really good wisdom with our audience. If people want to connect with you, learn more, and maybe get involved in your nonprofit or learn more about your longevity work or connect with you as a mentor, what's the best way for them to learn about you?
If you just across all my social media, my YouTube channel, I'm at Real Dave Guttman, Guttman. So on every social media, I'm the same. So just go there, and you can DM me, you can email me. There's a million ways to get a hold of me. So yeah, and if I could be helpful to anyone, that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Thanks, David. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.